Students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be identifying and graphing conic sections, and you will be able to do 11.7. Today, students will be able to identify conic section type and manipulate the equations to graph them. But what are conic sections? Figures that come out from cutting cones. So if I'm talking about the circle, it's because on a cone you cut straight across the little tip of that cone and you end up with a circle. The ellipse is if you cut a little slanted, it forms an ellipse. The hyperbola is if you have two different cones and you cut straight down, then you get the hyperbola. And for the parabola is if you cut slanted on one of the cones a little past the middle of the base. And I created a demonstration or model of how this would look in three-dimensional. I did with kinetic sand. It came kind of okay, but if you want to watch that, I'll link that at the end of this video, or you can see it in the description below, and you can go ahead and see when I cut the cone, okay, to form those conic sections. Okay, and so something else that we have seen in these past videos is that when you have y equals x squared, this is the type of parabola that you get. If you have x isolated but the y is squared, then this is the parabola. It's actually hugging the x-axis. And when you have both x and y squared, not only one of the two variables, but both are squared, and that's equals to something, then that forms a circle. If you haven't, I recommend that you watch the previous videos, especially 11.4 and 2, but we'll be using completing the square, canceling, and so all of what we have watched in the previous 6 videos are going to come up in this one. Okay, for the following, it says identify what type of conic section type it is, then graph. If you have x squared only, then that's going to be a parabola. Also, when you have y squared only, but not x, that will be a parabola, but it's going to open sideways. Okay, so that's important to know in here. So for number 1, x is squared but not y. That means that it's going to be a parabola opening so that it hugs the y axis. Okay. And so the first thing that you want to do when that's the case, we're going to isolate the y. So we're going to get rid of x squared. We're also going to get rid of that and that as well. Okay, but if we do it on one side of the equal sign, we have to do it on the other side. And at the same time, we will be arranging them. Okay, so these cancel and we end up with y equals, and I'm just going to put it here. Sorry that I draw all the way over here. But we get positive x squared, negative x, and then these combined, 5 and 3 are positive 8. Now we're going to complete the square. And so we bring down x, and if you recall from previous lessons, we divide this by 2. So you are going to have negative 1 divided by 2 is negative 1/2. But then we said that we were going to add to complete that square, and that will be a complete square, right? We raise that to the second power, so negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 is positive. 1/2 times 1/2, let me show you in here, is 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, and it's positive because negative times negative is positive. So positive 1/4. And if we're adding 1/4, we have to also subtract that 1/4 outside because it's on the same side of the equal sign. And it's just like we are adding 0. Positive 1/4 and negative 1/4 cancels each other. So we didn't do anything to that equation, right? We didn't manipulate it at all by adding 0, basically. And so 8 minus 1/4, that gives me 7 3/4. How did you do that? Well, some people want to see that part, so let me show. So 8 minus 1/4 We are going to borrow a whole in there, and it's going to be 7. So that one whole is the same thing as 4/4, right? Un entero es 4/4. One whole number, the one that I took away, is 4/4 because 4 divided by 4 is 1. Okay, so that's the one that we took away from there. That's 1. And now I'm able to subtract. You just bring down the 7. And when you have common denominators, all you do is subtract the numerator and keep the denominator. So 4 minus 1 is 3. So that's how you got 7 3/4. Okay, now it's ready to graph. Remember that when we have x squared, it's 0, and then 1 times 1 is 1, negative 1 times 1, negative 1, and negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Then when we go here, 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. That's just my mother graph, and all I'm doing is squaring the x. That's my mother graph. So now to that mother graph, these are the transformations. Inside of the parentheses, you go the opposite. So if it's negative, you're going to go positive on that variable inside of that parentheses. And so it's going to be 1/2 spaces to the right. For this one, you keep that sign. We don't do the opposite, and it's related to the y over here. So that means that you're going to go 7 3/4 spaces up. Okay, so for that mother graph, we're going to go half of the square, and then 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 3/4 is 3 out of 4 if you cut it. So that's where the vertex is. You're going to go 1 space to the right and 1 up. This is a little hard, but 1 space to the right means half of it, right? Because this is 0.5. And then 3 to 3/4 in here. For the other one is 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. And I know because of fractions it's a little harder, but you can do this. Then 1 space to the left and 1 up. 1 space to the left and 1 up goes around here. And then 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 3/4 in there. And that's my new graph. You can do it with fractions as well. So that's my parabola. So parabola. Okay. For number 2, we see that x is squared and y is squared, so that's going to be a circle. Okay, that's the type of conic section that we have in this one, and I'm going to arrange it so that we can work with it. We're going to put x squared plus x and leave a space, y plus y squared minus y, leave a space, and then equals 10. So now we're going to complete the square. Again, this was covered all in the previous video, so I recommend that you watch them. And I think this was in 11.2. So in here we're going to have x. Divide this that we don't have by 2. And so 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. And we're going to do the same thing in here for y. So negative 1 divided by 2 is negative 1/2. The next step is to raise this to the second power and add that. So 1/2 times 1/2 is positive 1/4. Negative 1/2 times negative 1/2, that's positive 1/4. Even if it was negative, just because you're raising it to the second power, you also raise the negative times negative. It becomes positive 1/4. And if we add 1/4 here and 1/4 here, we will add 1/4 in here plus 1/4, which is 2/4, right? And in numbers, 10 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 is 10 2/4. If we're thinking of this as fourths, 1/4, that means 1. The other 1/4, that's the other part, which is 2/4, which is the same as 1/2, right? Of the whole circle, you have 1/2. Okay, so 10 and 1/2. Okay, so now that we know, we're going to write 10 and 1/2 in here. Now that we have it in standard form for the circle, we can graph it by finding the center. For the center is the opposite of that, so if it's positive 1/2, in here we'll have negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 will become positive 1/2 for x. And for the radius, we take the square root of the answer. So the square root of, and the square root of 10.5 is 10.5. So 10.5, take the square root, and that gives us 3.2. Now the center is a negative 1/2, positive 1/2, so right there. And then the radius is 3.2. So 3 will be going to half of it. That's 1, 2, 3, and a little bit more. Okay, almost at 4. And so now we just, we create our circle. And there it is. Okay, for number 3, x squared, y squared. Oh, that's a circle. And so what we're going to do is add y squared to both sides. And we get x squared plus y squared equals 16. Again, for the center, we are not subtracting or adding anything to x, so that's going to be 0. We're not adding or subtracting anything to y, so that's also 0. So it's in the origin. And for the radius, we're going to take the square root of the answer. The square root of 16 is 4. So we have the information that we need. 0, 0 is right here. And then 4 spaces away will be 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. And you can do it to the left, down, right, or up. It doesn't really matter. Okay, now we open our compass to 4 spaces away. And again, you might want to turn the page instead, or you might want to just create your circle there. Okay, so there it is. Okay, now we have x squared plus y squared. That means that it's going to be a circle. And the center is at 0, 0 again, because nothing is being added or subtracted. And the radius will be the square root of the answer, which is the square root of 0 is 0. So my center is at 0, 0. But then it doesn't go anywhere because the radius is 0. So basically we end up with not a circle, but rather just a point. Number 5, x is squared. So that means that it's going to be a parabola and it will open up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the x squared and the x. If we do that on one side, we have to do it on the other side. So plus x squared minus 2x. These cancel, and we end up with y is equals to x squared minus 2x plus 1. Because they are not like terms, we're just bringing them the same way. Now we're going to complete the square. We put x, divide this by 2, divide by 2 gives us -1. And then in here, I want you to notice that if we raise this to the second power, -1 times -1 becomes +1, which we already have in here. So it's already a complete square. We don't need to add 1 and subtract 1, because at the end, you will end up with 0, right? Let me show you if I can erase it. So -1 times -1 is +1, but if you add 1, you have to subtract 1 to add basically 0, because it's on the same side of the equation. And so that's when you simplify it, 1 minus 1 is 0, so plus 0 in here is the same thing as not having it, okay? Now that we have that information, we can say that it's not going to move on y at all because it's 0 spaces, and even if you didn't have it, it only has this transformation, which means move the opposite on that axis, okay? So if it's negative, it's going to move to the right, to the positives. And so my mother graph for a parabola, it's this right here. Again, that's explaining 11.4, but if you saw it already, we're just moving one space to the right. So my new graph will be with the vertex at this point, and 1, 1, 1, 1, 2 spaces and 4 up, 2 spaces from the vertex and 4 up. That's my new graph. As you have noticed in this video, I haven't done any plotting points. In the previous ones, if you want to see the specific values for x and y and how to choose them, then those are explained before in the previous videos. Okay, for this one, we have x squared and y squared. That means that it's going to be a circle, and I forgot to write it on the previous one. Number 5 was a parabola, so make sure you write that in there. So for the circle, I'm going to separate first the x and the y, but I noticed that for x, I only have x squared, so that's already a perfect square. I'm going to get rid of this 9 by subtracting at the same time, and then I'm going to have here plus y squared minus 10y equals 0 minus 9 is negative 9. I'm going to complete the square for y, just bring down the x squared. And so in here, I'm going to have y divided by 2. So negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And that's squared. So I'm going to raise this to the second power, and negative 5 times negative 5 becomes positive 25. So I'm going to add it in here, and I'm going to add it on the other side. Okay, remember that if we have it on the same side, then that's when you have one positive and one negative. But in here, we're adding it to the on one side of the equal sign and on the other side of the equal sign. That's why it stays the same. To keep the balance, you do the same thing on both sides of the equal sign. Up above, adding and subtracting is because the equal sign is here. You're adding to the same side. That's why you have it one positive and one negative, so that you don't manipulate what you had before, and you're just adding 0 by adding opposites, because they cancel each other. In here is on one side and then on the other. That's why the same sign. You're keeping that balance. Okay, so now this 25 is right here, because if you remember, x, and it's negative actually, x minus 5 and x minus 5. So in here you have x squared. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And negative 5 times negative 5, which is the same dimensions, becomes positive 25. So that's the y squared. And actually it should be y, I'm sorry. The y squared, it's from that. The negative 10y is when you add those two, and 25 is that part. Okay, again is y, I'm sorry about that. And these are just the square, just means this times this, which is the same thing. Okay, y minus 5 times itself, meaning y minus 5. Okay, so this is the same as this. On this side, we simplify, and negative 9 and positive 25 gives me 16. Now we're ready to find the center. So the center is going to be 0 for x. Remember that we don't consider that. And some people want to put, oh, negative 2, the opposite. No, it's only what is being added or subtracted. And for y, the opposite will be positive 5. The radius, we take the square root of 16, and that's going to be 4. And let's graph it. 0, 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's right there. The radius is 4 spaces away, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we form our circle. Okay, there it is. For number 7, I can see that y is square, so that means that my parabola will open sideways. And so from 11.4, if you have the mother graph, it's going to be x equals y squared, meaning that your mother graph will graph 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, negative 1. Then we had 4, 2, and 4, negative 2, because y squared means 2 times 2 is 4 for x. Negative 2 for y, so negative 2 times negative 2 becomes positive 4 for x. Okay, so that was my mother graph, just so you have that in mind. And now let's start working with this equation. So the easier way to do it is to just change all the signs for them. It's like multiplying by negative 1, and that will just get my x to be positive. Okay, so negative 1 times every single term. You have to multiply every single term. So negative times negative becomes positive x. Negative times negative is positive y squared. Negative times positive becomes negative 8y. And negative times negative becomes positive 16. Okay. For some of you, you already can see that this is a perfect square, because half of this is negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 4 becomes positive 16. So that's going to be a perfect square. But if you're not sure and you just want to complete the square like we did with the other ones, you can leave a space so that we can also get the practice. Okay, remember that we just leave a space. Whatever number this was, we left another space because we're adding and subtracting the same amount and that means that we're adding 0. Okay, so in here you would have x equals, you put the y, divide this by 2, and that becomes negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Square that. And remember that we're going to raise this to the second power. Negative 4 times negative 4 becomes positive 16. But you're also subtracting 16 so that those cancel and it's like you didn't add anything. And so this comes from this perfect square, right? So y minus 4, y minus 4. Y times y is y squared. Negative 4 times y is negative 4y. Negative 4 times y is negative 4y. And negative 4 times negative 4 becomes positive 16. That's your y squared, your negative 8y, and your positive 16. Okay, and we just have the dimension in here to the second power because you multiply that 2 times. Okay, now that we have that, 16 and negative 16 becomes 0, so plus 0, or you just don't have it. And again, what this means is that we don't move anything on x. This is related to x. And we move this the opposite direction of that variable. So y is up and down. When it's negative, the opposite will be positive, meaning that it's going to go 4 spaces up. So my vertex will go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces up. And then from there, you just graph the other points. 2 spaces and 4. 2 spaces from the vertex and 4 right there. And that's our new graph. And forgot to label it again. What conic section is this? It's a parabola. Okay, one more. Okay, x and y are squared again, so that means we have a circle. Okay, that's the type of conic section we have. And it's all set up for us, so the center will be, since we're not adding or subtracting anything, it's going to be 0, 0. And for the radius, we're going to take the square root of 22, so we use our calculator. 22, the square root of that is 4 point. We're going to round it to the 10th because that's 9. When it's 5 or more, then that gets 1 more. Okay, so 4.7. And we have 0, 0 for the center. And 4.7, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.7 is very close to, it's more than half, but less than the whole number. Okay, we open our compass. And there's our circle. That's all for this lesson. If you can please give us a thumbs up, subscribe around here. Here is the entire list for this unit. And here you can find the video where we explain and show how we're cutting to obtain the different conic sections, cutting into kinetic sand. For now, you're able to do 11.7 and have fun.